Well, today we're in Columbus, Texas for our next gunfight. Behind me is the Columbus Courthouse, which was built in 1891, so in 1890 is under construction. So I'm going to paint you a little picture of what the town kind of looked like back then. So Robert Stafford had built his house and this opera house and bank in 1886. So he lived next door to his bank and opera house. The opera house could hold 1,000 people, and he could watch the shows from his living room on the second floor of his house through the window. They also down here in the corner have this water tower that was built because they had a fire at the livery stable down the street on Spring Street here a few years before. So they built this big water tower and had fire hydrants around the town, and then the bottom of the water tower was the fireman's pump that they could haul around town to hook up to the fire hydrants to fight fires when they happen. Down at the far end of Spring Street, past that big oak tree, that's where the calaboose was. It sat in the middle of the road for prisoners that they'd caught. Let me turn the phone around real quick. So in front of me there, on the other side of the water tower, where that two-story building is, that was Nicholson's Saloon. It was a wooden building back then. So on July 8th, 1890, Constable Larkin Hope had arrested Robert E. Stafford's son for disorderly conduct. So Stafford left his house, went across here to Nicholson's Saloon to confront Larkin for arresting his son. So R.E. was a pretty important man, and I'm sure he was giving him the business on, do you know who I am, and do you know who you arrested my son? So he was chewing him out there on the corner. Well, Larkin's brother, Marion Hope, was inside the bar, and R.E.'s brother John came down the street to see what was going on. So Constable York was talking with a man named Hancock, Mr. Hancock, and they were sitting on a rock over here in front of the courthouse. I'm assuming that's a rock that was being used while they were building the courthouse. But they heard what was going on, and so they ambled across the street to try to break up the fight between Stafford and Hope. So Constable York and Mr. Hancock went across the street and tried to break up the fight. When they did, Marion Hope came out of the bar and told them to take their hands off his brother. So they did. About that time, Larkin's wife rode up in her carriage. So they stopped fighting for a little while, and Larkin went out and talked to his wife, and she told him to go on home. And he said he didn't think there'd be any trouble, but he'd handle it and he'd be home later. And so he sent her on home. So he turned back around and walked back over to Robert Stafford, and they got into it again. So R.E. was chewing out Larkin, and his brother John was just standing there watching what was going on. Marion had gone back in the bar, and the constable was also standing there watching what was going on. So at some point, Robert Stafford called Larkin something son of a bitch, and Larkin said, "That's all I can stand," drew his pistol and shot his brother John in the belly. And then he turned and shot R.E. Stafford in the chest. So the saloon had doors on both sides of it. So John went and sat down in the doorway here on Main Street, and R.E. Stafford stepped around to the door on Spring Street. When he walked inside, Marion shot him 3 more times and killed him. So then Larkin walked around to the other door where John was laying or sitting and shot him again and killed him. So R.E. had 4 bullet wounds, 1 in his neck and 3 in his chest. And John had 2 or 3. He had been shot in the belly, and they'd been shot through the hand and into his head. So I'm thinking he put his hand up right before he shot him that second time. So the bullet passed through his hand and into his head. So with this, the constable came up to Larkin and Marion and told them, I'm going to have to arrest both you guys, and they surrendered. So the constable's testimony was that R.E. and John Stafford, neither one of them were armed. That's the only eyewitness report I read. But he was arrested, thrown in jail, and he was bailed out November 9th of the same year for $5,000. And as far as I can tell, it never actually went to trial. The trial was moved to San Antonio, and it just never came up on the docket. So Larkin ended up becoming the deputy sheriff here in Colorado County, and we'll pick up our story with him in 1898, just down the street. All right, if y'all like my content, please like, share, and subscribe, and y'all keep exploring Texas.